I always felt like this was the hardest thing about the house. It's like if meetings start at 5, it's okay, or there's just that. Or like later than this, but.
I never want to interrupt that kind of blocking.
Yeah, that's why we keep you so late, because we don't.
Hey, that's awesome!
I
don't know, it's kind of low though.
I had that problem too, like the whole height of the ball is an issue.
Real, you know what? I never realized that. I used to sit on one of those for my desk chair, and then I was like, once you start.
Alright, I would like to call the meeting of the committee of the whole to order at 6:03. Do you want me to do that as you just wrote? Let's do that.
Already started.
Okay. Uh, So, with committee of the whole, we also do a statement of public notice, is that
Yep.
the case?
The meeting has been posted and noticed according to law.
Neat, and all trustees are here except for President Rosick, who is excused, so I'll be chairing this evening. And, let's see, item 5, discuss, well, it's not really item 5, it's item 1.
Yeah.
It's cheat sheet number 5. Discuss the RFP scope for transportation and parking analysis. Mr. Bart, would you like to present that
Trustee
to us?
McKay, sure. So, the information was in your packet, but I can briefly go over, the contents and my thought process behind it. I'm happy to incorporate, any ideas or questions you have within a revised scope. President Rosick did call me, since the issuance of the packet to give me some thoughts that I can share with you as well, and I think I can incorporate most of what, what that was reaching as well. So the goal here is just to get us all on the same page, so it'll be issued a RFP, we get consultants bidding, knowing what we're asking and what we're looking for in terms of deliverables. As the memo indicates, the tasks have been generally outlined as follows: street classification and circulation, traffic controls and calming, bike, pedestrian, and transit accommodations, infrastructure conditions and maintenance, green infrastructure potential, design approval and implementation processes, a specific task to define the metro market redevelopment circulation study as required with the development agreement with that development, a commercial parking analysis, a municipal parking analysis, residential parking analysis, public engagement aspect, and then plan development, approval, and implementation. I will just stop there, I suppose, and say it. I think this was a good suggestion, so it was recommended to possibly switch commercial parking analysis and residential parking analysis into daytime parking analysis and nighttime parking analysis, just because the boundaries aren't as black and white as this area is commercial, this area is residential. They do bleed into each other, and the concept of daytime and nighttime are much more defined. So I had no issue with that change, so it would be my expectation that I would revise those two aspects to read one daytime, one nighttime. So
What is nighttime?
I guess whatever our current regulations indicate, and whether or not that needs to stay, I'm not the parking person. Diane would be the best person to
What in
answer that
terms of
question.
demand, like 6 PM?
Yeah, overnight, nighttime and
eight,
overnight
yeah.
parking, is it?
But I don't even know if
I'll
that's
admit,
consistent. We have so many different regulations, I don't even know if it's consistent across the village.
and I'll admit the planning department does not, at this point, engage with those requests, and so, I guess the concept would be to have the category in here, within the category, then define it within
Mhm.
the analysis, so that if there are inconsistencies where it's 6 PM in this regulation, it's 8 PM on that sign or whatever, but then we can clarify that. Does that answer the question at all? or-
Well, I was thinking more from a demand perspective that there's probably like after work, and that the commercial district, there's sort of an after work rush,
Mhm.
and then like a dinner, kind of evening rush.
And then an overnight,
And the-
different need.
But then the overnight and the resident, I'm just saying, if you're gonna make it
Right.
daytime and nighttime.
Where does that one fall?
Yeah, I mean, they need to look at everything,
Right.
so, I don't know how you.
Isn't commercial, you have to do some demand analysis and stuff, but the needs are the needs, like business type or business?
Yeah, so out of the planning side of me, I did the commercial based on, our zoning code requires X spaces for X type of uses, right? So to me, in the zoning world, it's easy to say it's a commercial parking zone, it's a residential parking zone. But the streets, like has been mentioned, do bleed into each other, so if we're talking about parking regulations, it's not, if you're going to a commercial business, you're parking on a residential street. So I still think I'd probably have to hybridize it some way to
Yeah, I
include,
think
Yeah,
you can.
you just
to
have to
include
figure
all
out
4 of
how
those categories within 2 parameters. And that's the purpose of this discussion, is to get these, ideas out there so I can revise it and hopefully come back with something more comprehensive that we're all on the same page with. So, not to get too far off track, but I just wanted to throw that out there, that was definitely something I feel like I should be looking to modify, to change commercial and residential to daytime and nighttime, but then incorporate aspects of commercial and residential within there. So I'll just keep going, and then feel free to, at some point, you guys can just take over if you'd like, but, the next one was, if there's any specific desires, so I mentioned the Metro Market Redevelopment Circulation Study, that's required as part of the development agreement with, that development by June of 2019, to have that studied and look at implementation of it. So if there's any other specific areas that have come up either in your time here, or, as you're thinking about it, whether that's, parking at Atwater or something, or whatever it is, if there's something specific the board wants to include, obviously there'll be a cost associated with that, so I wouldn't wanna go too specific on these things. I kinda got the general, but if we're missing anything in terms of that, we're happy to incorporate it to see where that can go. The next aspect is kind of guiding the process. I had suggested that, I'll be the primary contact with the consultant, but most things will go through a working group, as I've defined it, consisting of staff, appointed officials, the Conservation Committee, Bike Ped, they've both reached out to me with interest in participating at some level, Elder Services Board as well. The BID, Business Improvement District, obviously they have a stake in the commercial parking aspect of this. The school district, they're a big player in terms of generating traffic and drop-off and loading zones, things like that, so we'd like to hear their perspective. Crosswalks comes up quite a bit with them, stop signs, as well as elected officials. And I guess on that note, I'd be looking for guidance from the board, whether or not anyone would like to specifically join that working group, or if perhaps the Public Works Committee or someone.
Yeah, I was gonna say, does it make sense, instead of kind of, and maybe it doesn't, but just asking the question, instead of trying to cobble together a new committee, maybe run it through Public Works, and then have Public Works kind of loop in all these different stakeholders? It does come from the board, so I'm trying to think of the best way to not recreate the wheel, but.
Yeah, and it could go that, I guess, from my perspective, it goes each way. It depends on how much you want to be involved, right? I didn't want to overtask the board with some very specific questions that, say, staff would probably be the person to answer the question to. And so I was thinking of it, staff would review it and then present the findings or whatever to the working group at that meeting. But if the board or a portion of the board wants to be more hands-on and avoid having to discuss it twice, because I understand that perspective as well, that's why they'd be members of the working group. But if they want to be more involved, I'm happy to make the process as easy as we can, because I understand this is coming from the board, and it will be ultimately your decision to, approve, adopt, or implement these decisions. And I wouldn't want to go through the planning process and not have agreement, from this body. So I had put elected officials on the working group, but there has been, and President Rosick also, questioned that with me as well, whether or not it makes more sense to have more upfront involvement with the body that's going to be approving it. My thought process was just, I didn't want to overburden the board with this specific task, but if the Public Works Committee or a different subset wants to take more responsibility with it, I have no issues with that. I you're the current chair, I believe, of the Public Works.
I believe so, yeah.
So if that's something you're willing to entertain.
I would be interested. I think this is a big enough issue, and there's enough residents that are very particularly interested. But I see the value of having this working kind of support group gathering and giving input and doing some of the legwork.
And I will say, just to be clear, in the working group, I didn't intend to have citizen members. It was more of a technical, advisory kind of thing. Public engagement would be next, where that's where the citizens would come in terms of, providing some input on that. But the working group, to me, was more to make sure the consultant was doing what we asked them to do and getting the product that we're looking for. And so having the Public Works Committee involved with that I see no issue with that. If the Public Works Committee has time to do that, understanding all other obligations the board has, within the year. So I guess that's something to clarify with an RFP. whether or not you'd like to specifically be called out in that. I had that the working group would be confirmed prior to the commencement of the contract, so in my mind, there's still some time to discuss that.
What
I
are
was-
the types of things you would use the working group for?
So to review drafts, as RFPs, issued, there's, 8 to 10 tasks, so as those, whether they're chapters or individual components come in, my expectation would be the working group would receive the draft of that and then indicate whether or not something's missing or whether or not something's not clear. As the point person, I think I would do that first, because I wouldn't wanna send something out that's not worth reviewing, but my expectation would be that the working group would, quote unquote, be working on, making sure that the work product is moving along. So I said monthly participation, I believe, in my memo. That would be my hope. So,
And I'd be happy to participate on that basis. I mean, it sounds like you're asking us to review drafts to get to make sure we're getting the deliverable that we expect.
correct.
And I'm happy to, I'm happy to kind of lend a hand doing that.
Okay. As part of the working group, or does the working group concept make sense, I guess, is what I'm looking for? Or would you rather be more of a leader up front before the working group gets to see things?
I think the working group concept makes sense. I don't
Okay.
think that, and I mean, again, tell me if I'm wrong here, but I think that, there's several, this is something that was identified as a priority, it's high visibility within the community. I think there are probably several of us who would wanna be a part of this as it goes along, as opposed to one of us being a part of it and then presenting up at the end.
Yeah.
I think that-
And I don't wanna go through the whole process and then come to the board and then realize there's 15 more, things that have to be ironed out, so I think that makes complete sense to incorporate that more specifically within the working group concept, so, I'll just make that more clear, I guess, in the RFP itself.
I would keep that, if you really want it as a technical sounding board, I would not have like 10 people, I would have, Public Works, police, maybe someone from Pet and Bike Safety, and Wes, keep that small also, because I don't know if we want drafts to be, and then once there are actual drafts, or it's a final draft, then to the Public Works Committee, because I don't know that we want all these preliminary drafts going to the committee and being public documents.
That
But
makes sense to
I don't
me.
know that conservation and all the plan and CDA's involved because they're funding that particular part, but it seemed like a large group and,
And I guess my thought would be that people would participate as it was relevant to them, so if the chapter comes in on green infrastructure and, if not relevant to someone, they wouldn't need to be as involved, but I understand you might have 20 people that wanna be involved in all aspects of it, so it's my best shot at, who I thought would wanna participate and how we could best utilize their skills, so,
but like you said, there's gonna be a second part, once we have a draft and we've then there's a whole second part where we're talking to the broader community and the
Right.
public and getting their input on it, so, I mean, this is really just working with the consultant and making sure we're getting a work product that will be useful to us, so.
Yeah, the second, I view it as two-tiered as well. So, I mean, what I think that, I'm happy to help with I think it's two conversations, first we make sure we get the deliverables, and then we kind of figure out how we wanna use those deliverables and get the public involved, so I think it's two-tiered, and I think this one's down the line, I think this one's right. The other one's right now.
okay. And with that first tier, is that more than is that staff and public works, or is that, I guess I'm confused, I just wanna confirm which tier,
I think that would be the
People would be
working
on.
group, like the first.
As
year
I've
would be-
defined it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then, once we have sort of flushed everything out, then we move it over to Public Works. And that would include, that's sort of my thought.
Isn't that-
I mean, we don't have a public works.
I was gonna say, this is
I think
reinstating a
it might
committee
be
that's
good to
been
get a little
defunct.
more frequent reports to the committee of the whole, or just so we can react, or
This is a
so
big
the
deal.
stuff doesn't go
Yeah.
off. And people are starting to formulate some regulatory structure, and it's like, no, and then it's off,
I just also know committee of the whole is already,
Oh, I'm not-
already lining up, what can be presented within this 6-month period, so
Right.
the opportunities for me to bring it back to the whole, committee of the whole, I think are limited.
And I agree, I think queuing off of that, and being off of this being a big deal. That's why I'm trying to separate it out into two pieces. Because I think the first
Right.
piece is kind of the basic, are we getting what we're paying for?
Mhm.
And then I think you have a bigger policy, strategy, type discussions.
Communication.
Yeah, communication.
Correct.
Yeah, so I would, when we were discussing it, it seems like having, trustee Warren as DPW chair participate in the working group. And then I like all the partners that are listed, and whether they're part of that first tier, on some level, and then the second one, I think you can figure that out. But I also, trustee Amenta's point, that when it comes to being publicly noticed on a meeting, I think it should be a pretty cohesive draft, certainly not final, but then we can have, depending on how long that process takes for the working group and then bringing it to a committee level, for review, I think we can have reports, intermittently from that as far as just determine what the needs are.
And I think it's also important that we're clear with the community what we're doing, in both steps. For instance, I don't wanna get into this process, design what we wanna see in a deliverable and have the community think, hey, they're working behind the scenes to change all these
Right.
parking regs.
Mhm.
That's not what's going on in this
Correct.
first step. The first step is just a study, so we have something to kind of drive our strategy. And then the second step, when we bring the community in, is when we start to think about what we're going to do. So I think it's really important that we make sure that our communication is on point in terms of what we're doing in the two
Yeah,
tiers.
like I wouldn't call it the stakeholder group, I would call it technical,
Oh, yeah.
because stakeholder group is, people will get nervous. And I mean, customer service has to be their DPW police, pet and bike CDA, and pet and bike safety kind of incorporates the entire pedestrian safety act, so I would keep it to those 4 or 5. I don't know, plan commission, I'm uncomfortable, because what if something comes to the plan commission later, So I would just keep it to maybe like 4 or 5 and less, and then
Okay.
that's your technical advisory group.
Mm.
And then, we'll have a chance to discuss, once we get the report, okay, how are we gonna set this up to engage the public and talk to all these committees and.
Mhm.
So I like the idea of having less on the group. I also think that if any of us wanna be on the group, we can, especially having some of the more senior members that have been through a lot, not only at the board level of the discussions of parking over the years, but at the community group level, so.
And I would want any of that history to come into the meeting, so that, because I also have not been there for that, so I'd appreciate any perspective that could be added to the group, so I'm on board with that.
I would be very welcoming of
Right.
that too, given.
Okay. And that kind of leads into, so this technical advisory group, which I think is probably a better name for it, there also is public engagement, so that's the next step of it. Whether or not we want to define that the consultant must have, X number of town halls or things like that. I had left it open in my memo and in the RFP to kind of let me know what they think works best in terms of, they know what they have to provide for us, how do they get there, do they think that's an online survey, do they think that's 3 town halls, do they think that's, focus groups or whatever. I kind of left that more open. But if in terms of this kind of discussion where we're gonna wanna have specific public engagement, public meetings, if there's a value to adding, a minimum, say, of 2 or 3 or whatever the number might be, public meetings where these results can be shared, so that's not a committee of the whole, that's not a, board meeting, but it is an opportunity for the public to see the drafts that have gone through the technical advisory group. So it sounds like there might be value to that, so if you'd like me to, I can definitely, incorporate that as a requirement. I had left it open as a kind of let the consultant let me know how they wanna do it, but locally, I think we might have a lot of engagement on this one, so.
Yeah, there's an expectation for, what was Lake Street Drive, it's a band, Lake Drive.
Oh.
Were there 2 public meetings for that? Remember? So it seems like a minimum of.
Oh, yeah,
Two.
I'm just thinking of Wilson, this is.
Yeah.
Because people are concerned, both, the traffic issue is a very big issue with people, especially around the middle school and parents, and pedestrian safety, and the kid got hit, and then parking is an entirely
Right,
separate issue
right.
with an
So,
entirely separate group of
yeah.
people. So, yeah,
Maybe like 2 for transportation, 2 for parking, or, I was leaving it undefined because I don't know how the consultant wants to approach it. But if you as, board members know your constituents are gonna want at least, these things, I'd wanna make sure it's in there.
I wouldn't wanna tie up a lot of consultant dollars in the public meetings. I mean, that's something we as elected officials, it's kind of incumbent on us. I'm not saying that we shouldn't ask for their professional help in those regards, but that could be a runaway train. I mean, we could have 20 public meetings.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a lot of consultant dollars for what we're talking about trying to get to. And I'd rather have the analysis that we can kind of mull on and come up with alternatives, and we may come up with a couple different alternatives that we need further analysis on, but yeah.
Yeah.
I also I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I like your idea of asking the consultant what they would recommend regarding feedback. I mean, we will have to have some public input meetings, but they may have a different approach then. So it'd be nice to hear they've done it before.
I think I'm also thinking in terms of feedback that we want to be real clear what we're looking for. I mean, I guess sitting in this room, I know we want to share this study, but what are we asking the public to tell us? The study is supposed to drive our policy around some of these transportation and parking issues. Are we telling the public, come in and tell us what you think we should be doing? Are we making proposals then asking the public to come in and comment on that? I just think that we need to be real clear. Otherwise, I want to make sure we button that up before we have meetings. I think that's important to, here's what we're presenting. We'd love your comment on it. We want to be transparent, obviously, but I think we want to know what our ask is at that time, so.
I think it's definitely better to have alternatives for people to react to, it's definitely,
Otherwise it's
rather than asking an open-ended.
And that's
And
designed by
also-
committee, and that's never successful.
And they'll probably want, and part of it would be to present the analysis so that they understand how we got to the proposals that are before them. So I guess I'm thinking that, I don't know that the average resident would make a distinction between a session on parking and a session on transportation, even though people are, feel more passionate about maybe one or the other. And to me, it's more about, scheduling them so that we make sure there's equal access. So like a daytime one for people, for seniors if they wanna come out during the day versus nighttime, and then, a couple different nighttime ones. And maybe it would just be two, a daytime and a nighttime, I don't know. I would just wanna make them, available so we can get the broadest group